If you've been following the start of F1 2023, you'll know that McLaren is underperforming and waiting for a big upgrade to help save its season. But what's interesting is that McLaren is in this position because a seemingly minor rule change for 2023 badly caught it out and exposed a big problem with its intended car design. We have to go way back into 2022 as early as September to pinpoint the moment McLaren realised it was in trouble and why it had to make drastic changes that ultimately led to its real 2023 car not being ready for the start of the season. So what's McLaren really got wrong? What does it say about an underlying limitation within the team? And why should we be confident that McLaren can actually make the progress it intends to during this season? Around the same time, McLaren started to feel it was making real progress with its 2022 car. With a big Singapore package in September last year, it suddenly realised it was heading down a cul-de-sac with a specific part of its design for 2023. Late last summer, the FIA pushed through a rule change raising the floor edges by 15mm to combat the porpoising phenomenon that had emerged with the new regulations. McLaren was supportive of that change, even though it recognised that the sensitivities of the massive floors would likely mean a significant loss in performance and a big effort to work around that. That was the case for all 10 teams, but what McLaren didn't expect was for its existing floor edge design to be exposed as so incompatible with the new increased height. As McLaren started to develop around the 2023 floor edge height, it realised it had a much bigger performance loss than anticipated. Technical Director James Key believes McLaren was already in a minority camp for floor edge geometry. We don't know exactly what he means by this, but it's clear from McLaren's various revisions in 2022 and how unrefined its 2023 floor is compared to, say, the Red Bull, that it has had less command of how to manipulate the geometries to really control vortex generation and airflow distribution. McLaren reckons its philosophy was worse affected by the 2023 rule change. Around September, it realised it was not regaining enough performance and needed a significant change in direction. That's what team boss Andrea Stella has been referencing when he's talked about coming onto certain development ideas too late. As McLaren went down this new route, it quickly found gains relative to its original design. Unfortunately, Key says that by the time it came to signing off the Race 1 specification, the revised floor wasn't mature enough. It was already performing better in simulations, but McLaren felt its understanding of everything wasn't quite as robust as it needed to be. Key reckons that if McLaren had been onto this 4 weeks sooner, then it would have started the season with what it intends to introduce at Race 4 in Baku. Unsurprisingly, he says that is frustrating for McLaren, which is finding pretty prolific results in simulation, and this set of circumstances has made for a painful start to 2023. But the rule change might prove to be a blessing in disguise. Even if McLaren's original design may have been reasonably effective without the 15mm change, at some point it would presumably have discovered that the route taken by other teams was better. In other words, McLaren probably needed to wake up to this new floor edge geometry sooner or later. So this could end up saving McLaren from wasting even more time, or maybe never even realising the extent of its limitation in this crucial area. Something we've heard from McLaren for a long time now is that it cannot wait to get its new wind tunnel and simulator up and running. It's adamant that it's carrying significant deficits because of its current infrastructure for various reasons. While the Toyota tunnel that McLaren rents in Cologne is still good, it's not as refined as modern state-of-the-art tunnels used by other teams. In addition, every time McLaren wants to try something in the tunnel, it loses several days because the parts need to be physically transported back and forth. This is just not efficient enough in modern F1. And finally, the rent McLaren pays is in the millions per year. This is money that's being diverted from its development budget. So no surprise that long term McLaren really wants this addressed, and we are all familiar now with the argument that this is key to McLaren being a title challenging team longer term rather than just a short term gain. The new tunnel is currently going through a calibration phase. Stella can actually hear it from his office and described it as quite a reassuring noise as he knows good things are coming. McLaren will start using the new wind tunnel at the end of June. It may inform some work on late 2023 updates, but its primary use will be assisting later phases of the 2024 car development, and then the 2025 car will be the first to be designed totally in the new wind tunnel. But here's the thing, the current wind tunnel cannot be blamed for how McLaren has started the 2023 season, and the team knows it. Stella believes it has simply not done a good enough job with aerodynamic development, and its understanding was just lacking compared to rivals. That is evidenced by how excited McLaren is by the new development path it's been pursuing. It's true that there is a deficit in the quality and speed of its development, but good development is clearly still possible if the designs are strong and the tools are being used properly. Ultimately, its current facilities could have created a better 2023 car, because that same setup is literally what's producing the upgrades McLaren is banking on to save its season. Stella says that McLaren simply could have done a better job independently of the wind tunnel, and that's being reviewed internally. Much like the silver lining that it was better late than never to identify a weakness with how it worked the floor edges, McLaren's overall development process should benefit from this. If it interrogates the weaknesses that led to this gap in aero knowledge and proves that it can use better understanding to create a stronger car using the current facilities, then McLaren can be more confident it's in a better place to use its new facilities longer term. Ultimately, it would be a huge missed opportunity to build a brand new wind tunnel and simulator if McLaren's methodologies mean it wouldn't use them to their full potential. Based on the fact McLaren started this rules cycle on the back foot in 2022 and then realised it had the wrong approach for 2023, it seems clear that there are underlying weaknesses in either the design team, its processes, or both. It must find a way to address this, or else McLaren will always be a step behind its rivals and copying them rather than coming up with better designs itself in the first place. McLaren has been managing expectations since the launch of the MCL60 because this version of the car is the result of the old development direction and is months behind the curve. Its big upgrade is due to arrive at the 4th race of the season in Azerbaijan, with some big upgrades in Saudi Arabia and Australia before then. So it's all about damage limitation for now, and the season opener in Bahrain was obviously a terrible start to that. A disastrous double DNF was caused by a wiring problem and a pneumatic leak across the two cars. Oscar Piastri's F1 debut lasted 13 laps as an electrical issue started interfering with his gear shifts, then resulted in a car shutdown that couldn't be resolved by a steering wheel change as hoped. Teammate Lando Norris ended up a classified finisher 2 laps down after retiring at the end of a Grand Prix beset by a problem that started early on and required regular pneumatic top-ups. Pace-wise though, McLaren was actually more or less where it expected to be in the second half of the midfield. That was effectively confirmed by Piastri's Q1 elimination and Norris's narrow progression to Q2. But the tight-knit nature of the midfield means that McLaren is pretty encouraged by what it saw in Bahrain, especially as the track has never been great for its cars and its race pace was slightly better than expected. Norris eventually qualified 11th, and McLaren believes he and Piastri would have been both in contention for points. McLaren has tentatively concluded from this that the work done over the winter to eradicate some handling characteristics and improve how the chassis works with the tyres has paid off, even with this limited launch specification. While it was not a mirage that the MCL60 looked difficult to drive, McLaren reckons this is simply a case of a lack of downforce, rather than troublesome car traits like last year. The car is doing what McLaren expected and the data correlates as expected, it's just missing some aerodynamic load. This optimism could be blown out of the water if the incoming upgrades fundamentally change the car's balance again, but for now, McLaren sees silver linings. It feels better about its short-term prospects than it did before Bahrain and retains absolute confidence the car will improve by enough to propel it to the front of the midfield at least. It's important to stress that McLaren is seeing further gains beyond what it's preparing for Baku, so expects even more progress further down the line. But its rivals aren't standing still either. McLaren is chasing a moving target, and while there is logic to everything it's explained so far and it all joins up, right now its progress is entirely hypothetical. And even if it translates into reality, we still need evidence McLaren can outdevelop rivals, not just do a good job catching up with established ideas. McLaren's not the only team starting 2023 behind where it wants to be. If you want to learn more about why Mercedes is having such a difficult start to the season, check out this video that we made.